Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome aboard for yet another episode of the Infinity Panel. The panel has been convened, the round table, if you will. Here with me, as always, I have some special guest stars. The point of the show is to kind of, and admittedly, it's a little bit for me as well, right? I've spent a long time gaming, but not a lot of time kind of socializing with members of what we sometimes refer to as the community. But due to some good friends that I've been introduced to, and Mr. Everborn Saga and an HD gamer as well, people have kind of worked on some of the rough edges of my personality and told me I should get out more and kind of talk to people a little bit more. So I've been really happy to kind of start this series to try and do that. And so with me here today, I have Mr. TKO Asante. How are you doing, TK?
I am good. Now I'm laughing because Everborn Saga, the guy who you cannot get to game at all, is the one who's telling you to get out more. Okay, that is interesting. Good to know. I'm happy to be here, man. Thank you for the invite. This is going to be awesome.
Hey, it takes all kinds, man. And here with me as well, I have Mr. Fuzzy Belvedere. How you doing, Fuzzy?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for reaching out. And man, this is going to be an awesome show with you guys and some awesome topics to get into.
Well, thank you both, gentlemen, for agreeing to join me here for this afternoon for about an hour and a half to talk about games. And so without much further ado, let's get to it. So, Kay, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what has kind of been your main, which you've been gaming on, mostly in the recent past, and a little bit of kind of your gamer origin story, if you will.
Okay. So gamer origin story, real quick. Been gaming basically all my life. 42-year-old man. I turned 42 on Christmas. But yes, been gaming all my life basically. These days, the broad strokes of it are you're young, you have a hard time getting it together, obviously, getting the games you want to get. So you get older and you go overboard, and that's where I am right now. So I play on everything. I love VR headsets. I love all kinds of things. If there's a game to be played and it's enjoyable, I will want to try it out. So these days, actually, believe it or not, what has changed my gaming perspective? Well, first, what changed my gaming perspective was children. And now what's changing it in a more positive direction is the old Steam Deck, which I can now take with me and have little moment-to-moment games in between taking care of my precious ones. So that's been really getting me to game a lot more.
Can I break in and ask you one question? So kids.
Yeah.
Kids. Oh, yeah. For all you guys and girls who are out there who are playing your games and sometimes have comments about, people when they say, I can't do this, I can't do that, it's hard to get into this. Just understand that kids significantly change your dynamic in gaming.
Oh, bro.
One of the biggest ones, like when I got married, like you could still game, right? While you were, dual income, right? No kids.
Yeah.
When the wife comes in the room, an adult can kind of be a little understanding. Mm-hmm. Some adults, you don't get away with this all the time. Some adults will come in, some of the time, and will be understanding if you're talking to them while you're still playing the game, right? And I'm looking at you, Destiny 2, right? And a lot of these games that have come along, they're like, you can't pause, right? That's a big deal. When kids come along, and I'd like to hear your comments too about VR headsets, because this is one of my problems with VR too, is right, like when you have kids, like how and when you can consume VR is radically different. But yeah, kids don't understand that you can't pause the game.
No, and it's not their fault that you can't pause the game. I blame you there, Destiny 2. I am on team. I'm in a raid. I have a team. I have a crew. Put me in somebody's pocket for a minute. I'm pausing the game. Let the game commence without me feeling the AFK feeling. Come on now. I've been advocating on this one for a while. It's never going to work, but I'm still on that square, But yes, I feel your pain. I'm exactly there. So to the point on VR, well, in gaming in general, I find that what it does, kids tend to skew your game preferences because you have no choice. You're not playing Call of Duty while the children are awake. You're just not. If you're a decent parent. You're just not doing that. So what tends to happen is, first and foremost, obviously, I try to get them into games more. I'm out here, and those who know me know that I'm always out here waving my hand at the abacus known as the Nintendo Switch. And I'm sitting here asking Nintendo to, step up to the plate and actually hit something out of the park. But say what you will about them, when kids get into games, that is the console of choice. It is unbelievable. Like I thought the Joy-Cons were a bunch of playthings until my children actually started playing with them and really getting good. My 3-year-old, like really like that thing is his controller. He knows what to do with it, and it kind of gave me a big respect for that console and what they're aiming for. It's definitely not me because I can't, man hands. I can't deal with that thing, but. And that's why that's why the old Steam Deck is for me, because that thing is, Switch for men. I think that's a good commercial for that thing. But yeah, so with the kids, your Mario Karts and this and that, and they've been getting into it. There's a game called Piku Niku that I'm not sure anybody knows about. Like, it's out there, it's everywhere. My children, like, they worship at the altar of Piku Niku on a weekly basis. So we have no choice but to either play it or watch strategies and how to play it on YouTube when they're not playing it. So that's a big thing. But for me personally, these days, the thing that I jumped into, I think early this week, that I've been kind of playing whenever I have a chance to, is the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection on PC. I am, as you guys know, as I said, I'm a gamer from way back. So of course I've played all the Uncharted games, but you tell me it's on PC, you unshackle it from the confines of a console, all the potentials that brings, that gets me excited. So I found a good deal on it, and I jumped into it. I love what they've brought to it, but unfortunately, I love what they brought to it as far as, it's everything you want it to be. Graphically, it's amazing. If you're not a person who usually plays the PlayStation fare, this is the cinematic heights, and the Legacy of Thieves consists of the Uncharted 4, if I'm not mistaken, and the offshoot Uncharted, which
Lost Legacy.
Lost Legacy. Thank you. Oddly enough, I find Lost Legacy to be my Rogue One of the franchise. I love that thing for what it is. It's beautiful. It's by itself. It's amazing. Anyone who hasn't played Uncharted, you don't even have to play the other ones. Just play that one. Everborn has only played the first one, which, it's a spark, the first one. It didn't really get going until the second and third, but I still advocated that he played Lost Legacy because it goes to very special places game-wise, and even the material and the story and how they deal with an Indian woman and a South African lady, and how they communicate and all this from other sides of the world. It's just beautifully done. So I've been playing that. Now, the unfortunate side of that equation is that it runs really badly on PC right now, unfortunately. Some people have been reporting that it barely runs at all on PC. On mine, I'm able to play. I think the longest stretch I've been able to get before it crashed was about an hour and a half. And I have a pretty decently spec'd machine. I don't have to rattle off the specs, but I have a pretty decently spec'd machine that this should not be an issue at all. And yeah, it crashed for the multiple however many time, and I was like, okay, enough with that. But besides that, though, it does play well when it's playing. I've been playing it on my rig when I can, and when the kids are hanging out and we want to do something else, I play it on the Steam Deck. Runs really well at like 40 frames per second, which if you don't know, when you hit that 40 frames, you're basically halfway to a 60. The mathematical equation works out. It's very smooth, so it plays pretty well. In open areas, it can hitch, but if you know the size and scope of this game, just to see it on this little thing is amazing enough. So I've been enjoying that. And the final thing I'll say, which is my main, which I drip feed myself every once in a while because it's on everything at this point, including my phone, is Persona 5, which I play from time to time. I know it's 100+ hours. I'm not going to finish it in 2022 or 2023 probably, but every once in a while I'll play into that because I love that game. Even the buttons, the menu systems are just, they took too much time and effort in that, and I really respect it for it. So those are the things that have been keeping me busy this week.
So are you on two questions on your rig. Are you on an NVIDIA card, and are you on Windows 11?
I'm on an NVIDIA card, and I'm on Windows 10.
Okay. It's just
I have a 3080, and I'm on Windows 10, yeah.
Yeah, because I saw your tweet the other day that you'd experienced kind of numerous crashes, and like after I think like your third one, you were like, okay, I'm out. Like we'll wait for this to stabilize.
Yeah. And then I moved on actually to another game that was completely crashy too, but I didn't even talk about that one. That was Gotham Knights, but there's enough pile on that one. I'll leave that one alone.
So I wonder, and the fact that it crashes on your rig with an NVIDIA GPU in Windows 10, which I mean, my rigs are the same. I don't run Windows 11. All my gaming PCs right now are outfitted with NVIDIA GPUs, but runs fine on the Steam Deck when it's
Yeah.
it's a Windows game, so the only thing that's different is the abstraction layer using Proton versus DirectX, and then
That's cool.
and then that GPU in the Steam Deck, right, is an AMD GPU. So it's I wonder if that's
You see, when you get a bunch of techies on a podcast, then we start going in the techie direction, and now we'll start troubleshooting. I appreciate you bringing that up. I'm looking at my SD card, my 512 gig SD card right there. I plug that in there. Steam Deck turns into Windows Deck, and I can reinstall this thing on the Windows side and see if it crashes. That is an interesting concept. Yes, I will report back on that. Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. Fuzzy, same question. What have you been playing most recently as your main, and kind of a couple minutes on what is your gamer origin story?
Well, what I've been playing as far as my main are my usual suspect games, I guess you could say. A lot of GT7. I've posted a lot of clips of that. I'm big into racing and always have been. So as far as origin story, arcades, pole position, outrun, those were like the go-tos early on. I mean, there was some NASCAR racing in my family early on as well, but I've been hooked on cars and racing for pretty much all of my life, and a car enthusiast that now with kids have kind of moved away from the car enthusiast aspect and focus more on the gaming because it's a lot more affordable and easier to squeeze them into that as opposed to getting them into cars before they get their license and stuff. But GT7. It has its pros and cons, but it gives me what I want as far as track racing for right now. I've put in like 1,700 hours on Motorsport 7, and the only thing that the reason why I'm not putting as much time into that is I don't have as much control on the grid list or the cars that I'm going to be racing against and the paint schemes. Like I try to go for that recreation or realism where you have paint schemes from IMSA cars or GTS cars and things like that on the track type of deal. So I love recreating that. But another go-to that I always wind up playing is Division 2. And much like what you guys are talking about, like Destiny not being able to be a game that you can pause, the Division is, that same deal. And my wife doesn't like it. She understands, but she doesn't like it. And right now with my kids are a little bit older, so they're also playing some of these games that you can't pause, like Escape from Tarkov. One of my sons plays that a lot, and it's like he has to time it so he can do a raid after he gets all his chores done and before bedtime. And sometimes he winds up missing a chore, so it's like, yep. You got to hide in the bush or something like that and finish your chores before bedtime. But it's a whole different dynamic, like you said. When you have kids, it's definitely a different deal. Because before it was just me and the wife, and every now and then I could convince her to play like a 2-player game. Like Bushido Blade was like I think one of the favorite ones because she used to like chopping my feet, so I'd have to like limp around or whatever. But that's the two main games has been Division and GT7. As far as like my continued origin, I was the youngest, so by the time I came around, my brother and sister were already in their 20s. They're like adults at that point. So my sister was the first one to buy a console. Like she had the Atari 2600. My mom, believe it or not, was a gamer, and this being in the 70s. She had the Pac-Man that actually looked like a Pac-Man. It was kind of like it wasn't a handheld, I guess. It was almost like a tabletop arcade. There was the ones that looked like mini arcades, and then there was the one that looked like Pac-Man. It was a big yellow disc type of thing. She had that, and saw how much I took to that, and going over to my sister's house, playing on her Atari. So the following Christmas, it was a surprise for me to get a Coleco, and ever since then, it's just been, games after games until I think it was like mid tier of PS1. And then that's when my brother kind of showed me the difference between consoles and PC. And, me being a racing fan, I saw what NASCAR racing looked like on PS1 versus on PC. And at that point, I upgraded because I think at that point I was already out of high school, already, finished basic training and stuff in the military and whatnot, and had enough money to go ahead and buy me a Dell because that was the easier thing at that point as opposed to building from scratch type of deal. But a little bit of gaming everywhere. I know this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory. I play on most consoles except for Nintendo. It's something about that music. I think they have some sort of hypnotic music or signal in there that to the point where it's like you can hear like 3 to 4 notes of a Nintendo song and it instantly puts you back into a memory when you played that Mario game or whatever Nintendo game. So Nintendo is the only one that I don't really make purchases of. It's just more so a me thing growing up as a Sega kid, but and just enjoy as much gaming as possible. And I think I even got my kids hooked on it as well.
Yeah, man, like nobody should. I mean, we're on this panel, and as is the case with well, we've only done 2 episodes, but as is the case with most of the people that I have been like reaching out to and seeking, and again, following Everborn's advice and trying to socialize a little more, and the co-hosts on the Basement Radio Arcade podcast. By the way, shout out to Brap, who's out in the studio audience today. Most of us tend to be a lot of people who play on many different platforms. All that being said, and I worry sometimes that we carry that torch and burn it so brightly that there are people who may, like you, Fuzzy, right, may feel like, well, we're, looking down or considering the people who don't play on every platform, right, as outcasts. And that's not the case. Like, I didn't onboard to the Nintendo platform until the Nintendo Wii. And I bought the Wii, I had the DS, I think the DSi, and then I definitely didn't buy the Wii U, so I was off the Nintendo platform for a while. My Nintendo Wii was kind of classically how, as you would hear about in social circles, that it became like that, just that blue light, like flashing in the dark of my living room when all the lights were out. I used it predominantly because I really liked the interactive, like, weather reporting first thing in the morning. That was like one of my morning rituals getting ready for work. But I like fell off of the gaming aspect of it fairly early. And then I didn't return until like the Nintendo Switch. So, ain't no shame in anybody's game for for any platform that like doesn't appeal to them. And for me, like, each of the platforms has an appeal. Like, one of the things that I run into is there's a large degree of adhesiveness, of stick-to-itiveness, if you will, of people who are somewhat insistent that, or assume that if you play on platform X, you play there because, right? And so I get a lot of like, I've got 3 heads look when I say I play on the PlayStation, but I honestly don't play on the PlayStation because of those SIE games, right? Right now in my gaming life, and it's very interesting, having you gentlemen on here who are, I think the polite term is people refer to us as seasoned, meaning that we've been gaming a number of decades, have been around a very, very, very long time. And I spent a chunk of my life playing like the, cinematic, heavily narrative driven, story driven, what Sony refers to as its, near linear wide path type of design storytelling template. And those are great. But I played a chunk of them. And while I was playing them, I often denied myself the time to play PvP games, right, in shooters, because I was like, I can't do that. I've got to be informed of a certain opinion, of a certain content. And, but now I'm like, I kind of treat this as like my YouTube and Twitter retirement, right? like I've done my bit and parcel, now I'm playing the games that, that I, appeal to me. And I've been playing a lot of PvP and shooter stuff. So, people play on lots of different platforms. They play on lots of different reasons. And I think part of the tale here is for all gamers to maybe not be as presumptuous as they are about, why people play where they play, why people don't play where they play, etc. For me personally, I've been playing a lot of Halo Infinite recently. And it was just kind of my push to finish up my Season 2 Battle Pass right before the winter update drops here in a couple of weeks. I often get confused now because of that thing and then Call of Duty Modern Warfare, because their new seasons switch over, whatever, or like similar dates. But I just went back to Halo Infinite after kind of laying off for a number of weeks. But I kind of got that feel, right, to get back into it. I'd been playing a lot of racing games and other stuff. before then.
How are the desync issues going?
And this is where I game a lot, right? But certain things that are in the zeitgeist, I may not be the most informed person of. So there's desync, right? I don't honestly know. Like, I haven't seen, and admittedly, maybe it's because I haven't gone out looking for it and searching for it. Because I guess at the end of the day, maybe that indicates that it's not as big a deal to me as it is for other people.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't sat and watched and seen and learned what is a textbook tell of when desync is going on.
It's happening. Right? Okay. Let me see. The best way I can describe it, and actually, oddly enough, the last time I played Infinite, I experienced it. And admittedly, much like Mr. Everborn Saga, I am bot master number one. I tend to not be PvP because of the kids and all that stuff. So, but Halo is a big exception. I love Halo. I've loved that franchise forever. I play that campaign like ridiculous amounts. I think I've played that more than anything else. So I do jump into it from time to time. When you're playing a match and you see the person you're stalking in front of you jump behind you, that's literally it's like it desynchronizes from the network and then brings you back. But at that time, you were there. The other person jumped out and came back in a different position. And more often than not, you lose the shot. He gets behind you. You're dead. And it happens pretty frequently.
So I have seen that. For me personally, I haven't seen that frequently. In fact, that specific phenomena, I actually have never seen other than when I just started replaying here in the last couple of weeks. Like where I would see my own on-screen avatar, like suddenly, like the game, it seemed like the game would like blank, and then it was like a teleport. It was like, and then all of a sudden I was in a different place, right?
Exactly.
And that is literally the only time I've seen it. So
sometimes it happens to others in front of you. Sometimes it happens to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I will say, look, when you're playing PvP, things get a little spicy, right? And you're saying some things on camera or just into your headset that like are not part of my normal vocabulary, and I get angry playing PvP, and you will definitely assert that he's cheating, like that's crap, and there's no way he's played 59 matches and pops off like 24-6, right? Like so, there's plenty of other stuff that goes on Halo Infinite.
No doubt at all. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so I haven't seen a ton of that. That being said, like, hey, look, Halo Infinite has its problems. I'm by no means sitting here advocating like everybody should go out and play it. Like, in fact, as long as you PvP kitties stay off, that's good because that helps my stats. So, but I'm happy playing it. Probably the weirdest thing I see on Halo Infinite, because like you said, Fuzzy, I try and make sure that I periodically post gaming clips. I've been slacking this week by all means, but one of the things that always kind of is weird to me is I see people posting clips of Halo Infinite and they're like smooth, like butter, like they're just casually kind of moving through the match, and like popping up, and I'm like, it's like they never sprint, and I'm like, that's just. So I've looked at those and I've been like, that looks a little suspect. I'm not sure what's going on there. Like I don't know if it's my camera shake that I have set or whatever, but like when my clips post, like you see me hustling, you see me sprinting, you see a lot of sliding and whatnot. And I don't know, maybe just people approach it differently. Maybe I'm playing it wrong. I don't know. It's just, that's kind of been a weird thing that I've noticed that's out there in the community.
I've noticed similarly. It seems that people spend a lot of time cutting the smoothest things together, and I either don't have the time, the effort, or the talent to do the same. I don't know.
Well, there you go. Shots fired. Let's skip over and go to segment 2 and talk about some of the news headlines that have been out this week. So this first story I found over on Gamer Rant by Christopher Castlellaw. Sega Super Game arriving in 2026. Sega reveals that it will release its previously hinted at Super Game in 2026, bringing together multiple franchises from across the company. And I quote, article starts off, as part of its latest annual report, Sega has revealed that it will release a Super Game in 2026 that will bring together multiple IPs from the company's legendary catalog. Sega's Super Game was initially teased in 2021, with some rumors suggesting that the game may be influenced by popular titles like Roblox. That doesn't particularly sound appealing to me. I was thinking that this was going to head in the direction of like a PlayStation All-Stars or like a Super Smash Brothers, which you would think with all the Sega properties and characters, it would kind of be ripe for. Fuzzy, I'll start with you. Any thoughts or hopes, dreams, dismissiveness of this particular finding?
Well, it's kind of weird because when I first heard about the Super game that they announced probably about 6 months ago when they first started talking about it, I was thinking it would be more so just a larger game, not necessarily a bundle of like a lot of their IPs, but something where, let's say, for example, imagine Altered Beast, but reimagined, where it's like a werewolf hunter game or something along those lines with, current day graphics or visuals and so forth that would kind of rejuvenate that whole IP or something to that effect, or something that's, an ongoing game like a Destiny or a Division type of game, but something totally like unique or has a unique spin to it type of deal. But now that I've after like reading through this article, I'm hoping that it's not a multiverse like or a Smash Brothers like type game. The Roblox game I think is probably the worst comparison as far as because it does kind of kill any excitement. I'm not particularly a fan of Roblox, although I know they did have a few Call of Duty mods that were looking better than when Vanguard was first launched. But I would hope it would go in the vein more so, and this is probably going to sound a little left-sided or something, but a little bit more on like a Grand Theft Auto or something along those lines, where you have a lot of mini games within this open world, and I almost kind of wonder if they can, steer more in that direction, and kind of like what they even have in the Yakuza games, where you have an arcade where you can go play arcade games there. Like you could have like an outrun booth or like a virtual fighter booth and play that there, or race go-karts or something like that. Like I was thinking the Super game would hopefully go in more in that direction than, particularly like Roblox. Oh, I want to play like a first person shooter and here's all the created, user created maps and things like that. That's not as gripping for me as something that, I mean, even though we've seen Grand Theft Auto online played out for like almost, was it 7 or 8 years now? But I almost kind of wish Sega would go in that route, like, dare I say, almost a more Americanized version of Yakuza, like having a lot of different mini games all throughout that open world.
So I think I heard what may have been two different design models, and I want to make sure I squelch down on which one was kind of your primary. So on one hand, I kind of heard like you walk into an arcade and you have all of these Sega games around them, kind of like like you remember back at PGR3 where you used to go into your garage and there used to be like the Geometry Wars cabinet, right? But just propagate that amongst more games. So that was one model. Then I thought I heard another model that was sort of like you take on the persona of various Sega kind of avatars, and there would be maybe some RPG elements to it, and it would be more like a kind of Super Mario Party kind of game. So which one of those were you kind of primarily or
a little bit of both. In the arcade sense, where you would have certain go-to for specific type of like IP titles, but out in that open world, you could take that persona of that particular avatar throughout the world for, I would say, more of a larger game. Like, so the arcade would be more of like the single player experience, possibly, where you're playing Virtual Fighter, although it would probably be better if it was a multiplayer where two people are in the arcade playing that particular game. But in the open world, you could be Sonic, or you could be one of the characters from Altered Beast or something like that. And based on going to this particular area, you're investigating or doing a bit of a mission or something like that. So when I think Super game, I'm thinking like larger than your typical open world type of game, where there's a lot of different activities as well as mini games and things like that. So I know that's probably a big ask for considering all those types of genres mashing up together, but I think with Multiverse and Smash Brothers, we have enough of those types of brawlers now. A Sega one would be cool, but I kind of want them to do something different. That's kind of where I'm at.
Gotcha. And T, what are your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, honestly, when I first actually heard about the idea that they're an initiative for a super game, I was like, okay, well, there's their Fortnite competitor. That's literally what it speaks to me. And the article that you pull here does not change my thoughts on that. It's basically, hey, we see Fortnite's doing well. Let's make a Fortnite competitor. And the difference is Fortnite had to wrangle all these other disparate IPs to their cause. We have all these IPs already in-house, in stable, and by the way, we may not have the infrastructure for it. Here's Microsoft's strategic partnership, super game, right? This is literally what I saw when I saw this. Now the 2026 of it all, that's where I'm just scratching my head like, wow, okay, y'all are striking it and you're aiming the ball and you're pulling back. We were literally watching you build the plane in midair. We were hoping maybe there was some strategic moves already made that maybe under the covers we weren't aware of, but this is really a ways out. Which, hey, obviously ambitious moves take time, right? My question is, as personally, I think it's an interesting idea. They do have a lot of IPs that they have been sleeping on. They've been focused heavily on a few of their IPs that keep coming back. But we've already had 2 polls from Altered Beast on this show today, and I think that's more than Sega themselves have said that thing in a while. You know what I'm saying? So with that idea, I think that's interesting. But 2026, I wonder how Fortnite and the metaverse of it all will be when 2026 happens, because it seems that with the economy the way it is, and with Meta / Facebook literally careening either into the wall that is the metaverse that's not working, or them traversing it, by the time this game comes out, we will either have be in the world where metaverses exist and are thriving, or you'll say that word and it'll be the 4-letter word and people will backhand you in the face. They will finish this game and enter a world where we might not want them to be, so to speak. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So it's just one of those things that's really interesting. The timing will be interesting. I hope they can do something. I was hoping they would do something, footsteps rather than this huge initiative from jump. Because even Fortnite themselves started with a campaign that got you nowhere. I actually played that, and then eventually the whole Fortnite thing became. I feel like this is DC to MCU versus MCU building it themselves. You know what I'm saying? I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's really weird. My oldest asked me maybe a couple months ago. They were like, "Hey, I heard that Sega used to make consoles, right?" And I had to go through the whole history and explain this whole thing.
Well, please let me open the book to the way back days when.
Right, let me consult the book of knowledge. So it was an interesting conversation. One of the questions I'll throw out is, I think today quite honestly, I associate the Sega name today much more so with PC gaming than even console gaming outside of a historical context. When I think about present day and relevance, right, in the industry and in the art, right, and in the design of games, I think of them much more so as the publisher for Creative Assembly than I do as a console game manufacturer. And so part of my question I'll throw out with this topic of like Sega and IPs, like, what is Sega today besides Sonic?
Honestly, you are 100% right on that, and your assertion that Sega's brand recognition is more respected in the PC space than anywhere else, I completely agree with that. And I'll even go further to say, at this point, Sonic is more popular in the mobile and even in TV and movies and whatnot than the game space itself, and me and Mr. Everborn Saga always go back and forth on that on our show. We will get to more of that probably towards the later half of this show, but I honestly think that in today's world, I think that their moves here is to try and remind folks because like yourself, like Fuzzy, like a lot of folks in the gaming community, and I imagine also in the standard normal community at large, there are a lot of people that remember these franchises fondly. It's just, oh yeah, they're from that time of yore, if you will. Oh, remember when we used to play Golden Axe? It's just one of those things you say, right? And it's permeating the zeitgeist, and people hear it. So I suspect that they see that they had not diversifying their portfolio enough with all the Sonic, right? And yes, on PC they do a lot of great work, but it doesn't seem like they're out front when it comes to that with Sega, right? Some people even would not be mistaken in forgetting that Atlas is owned by Sega. They are a big a presence in gaming, right? But they're so far removed from Sega that it's kind of odd, right? It's almost like you don't want to. They're the Hyundai of the equation. You don't want to even say that's who they're from. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? There's rumors I hear that maybe Sony might want to buy Atlas. No, not Sega. Atlas. You know what I mean? So. I think they have some work to do to rehabilitate their PR, and bring these things together. And I suspect that this whole super game initiative that's both on the infrastructure side and now they're bringing all those IPs together, they're trying to remind you, hey, Sonic isn't the only one that shines here. It's not the only one that you should remember from us. I, for one, am still on my square waiting for the day when, don't even bring a new one, port the original version, the Xbox version of what do you call it, Jet Set Future. Port it to consoles. Port it to everywhere. We will pay you for it, right? What do you call it? Persona 4 Golden came out last year and made all the monies. And Sega scratched their head and went, "Oh, people want to play this? Please, bring back these old things. And then when your super game revolution starts happening, we might be ready for it because we remember your old IPs. We'll see.
I was gonna say, man, not the Hyundai, not that way, man.
Come on.
The official car of The Walking Dead, I might also mention. So Fuzzy, you've talked a little bit about kind of what unfortunately I have to say, legacy gaming. Before the turn of the century, as the young folk would call it today. And I was mentioning about and TK also talked about kind of the loss of the zeitgeist, right? With regards to Sega, when I think about, and I was a Sega kid. I had the Master System, the Genesis. I bought the 32X. I actually
you had the Tower Power.
I actually went all over town, right? Because I was staying up in the northeast U.S. Near Providence. And when I went to go get my...
You are from Rhode Island, as was I. Fantastic.
Not from, but I was up there during that time.
I lived there for a while. Okay.
But I actually, the night I went to get my 32X, and it was after work, I was driving in the dark, it was like in the winter, which is not a pleasant time to drive up around Rhode Island. I went and bought my 32X, and they actually didn't... So there was one store that had 32X games, but they didn't have the 32X. There was another store like an hour away that had... the 32X, but no games. So, hopefully I didn't just say the same thing twice. So the hardware was at one place, the games were at another place. I went out in the dark in the winter and got one, and then drove an hour away, into someplace in Massachusetts to get the other thing, and then came home.
If you know Rhode Island, that is a slog, boy. If there's any snow on the ground, watch yourself. Oh boy.
Yeah, absolutely. Bridges, yeah, that's the thing. So, so I cut my teeth on all these things, and I have the Saturn and the Dreamcast. So I cut my teeth on all these things, and when I think about the greats like Virtua Fighter and even Sonic, Echo the Dolphin, right? Unfortunately, in the time that's passed, in my mind, those things have been superseded in relevance by Tekken and by even Crash Bandicoot, right, to a certain extent. So Fuzzy, what are your thoughts again on Sega relevance, this notion of a super game? TK said, by 2026, it may be too late, right?
Yeah. It's one of those things where my fondest memories are of the arcade and then the stuff that they pretty much converted or ported over to the home consoles. Like I can't let go of the almost interactive arcade cabinets where it's like, okay, hang on, it's half of a motorcycle that you can kind of lean one or other side. And I know my kids have no idea about that because I showed them what games look like from my Saturn, and I even to this day, I still think the Saturn graphics were amazing. Now, keep in mind, that's where I bowed out after the Saturn. I didn't go with the Dreamcast because at that point, I had already spent too much money on hardware, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to try something different. But I don't know what their identity is for anyone that didn't grow up with that brand. I mean, yes, you have the Personas and the Yakuzas that still live on and are doing quite well, but I think it's hard to explain to what would be their potential customers this arcade brand that went into the home console business and then bowed out after a few years and some missteps and stuff. Where are they today, and how can they grab hold? Like Virtual Fighter, I think, considering how Street Fighter is kind of reimagined itself in the past two iterations, or past couple iterations, they could definitely do something with Virtual Fighter. Although going with today's standards, they're definitely going to have to step some things up, and I don't know if Sega is quite ready for that. I would hope so. I would hope that they would know, hey, we need to go more for photorealism as opposed to what was able to go by before. But I think Sega has a strong ability to come back as a brand for racing, the racing genre, whether it be motorcycle games like Baja or rally games, IndyCar or stock car racing games. I think they at least have that they could at least dive into. Maybe not go for the full-on sim market, but at least for the people that want to do like I dare I say like a Dave and Buster's, which is just think of a bar and arcade combined type of thing. I think with us coming out of the pandy and whatnot, people are going out more, and I don't know if something like that would possibly have a resurgence back here in the States. I know it didn't do so well in their home territory, but
Buzzy,
just
bring us back some Ridge Racer. Come on now, Ridge Racer.
Like
Come on.
I would love to see them in the process of not really I guess introducing themselves to the current gaming population with some of the things in like your Dave and Buster's or local bars and so forth, other than like a golf game or something like that. But I think they have their pedigree should allow for them to at least garner that arcade racer market without much hassle. And then as far as for like your not necessarily your third person shooters, but like your Afterburners or your Space Harrier type games. I mean, they're definitely out of the touch in comparison to like a Returnal, but I could see something like Space Harrier being almost like a Returnal style type game in this current era, and that might be something that would help bring them to the forefront, or at least have some form of resurgence without it being a direct copy, primarily because they had something similar to that back, in the arcade days. But I think that would be something that they should look into as far as just a reintroduction via the arcade and or arcade focused games that are quick to pick up, quick to play. I mean, even if they're just phone games in the iOS store or Google Play Store or something like that, I think that would be their better in at this point. Well, not better in, but something that they should consider and help them get a little bit more attention before the super game comes out, because that 2026, like Kesanti was saying, the whole landscape could change as far as what they're building on today could definitely wind up being, something that people don't even want to bother with by the time it is released.
Yeah, you hit some great points, and I thought I was going to have to put something in the penalty box and say we discuss it at some point later. You brought up, them kind of going back to Sega Rally Championship, right? And getting into the driving thing, and I was thinking, man, that's a tough road to hoe with Codemasters, with the Dirt series, and then I can't even remember the name of the studio and the publisher
taking up all the air and all the in the world of all the arcade racers, Forza seems to have taken all the air in the room. That's a very difficult, place to jump back into. Although I would totally love to see them try.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was doubling down on like the super niche of rally racing, right? Because you have, like I said, you got Codemasters and Dirt, and I mean you have Dirt Rally, right? The sim side of it. Dirt 5 was some kind of weird travesty thing that was a thing that I don't know that we need to talk about a lot. But then you have the other developer who does World Rally Championship, right? WRC 10, I think, was the most recent iteration of that. And I'm like, but I love how you then swung it and said, don't go to that end of the spectrum because you're going to get your lunch taken. But there is absolutely room in kind of the more arcadey version. Like Sega Rally Championship was great. It's like you race a lap, you get your time extended, right? That type of thing. That's not a sim, but Sega does. Sega's claim to fame, I think, in my mind, Virtua Fighter was maybe a little different because it was to me it was a very highly technical fighter. But a lot of their games are just oriented around. Let me not worry about where we have this type of gamer now who gets super wrapped around the axle. I was reading a thread on Reddit and somebody was talking about skill-based matchmaking, and all the people who flooded onto them. No, they don't need to take out SBM. You just need to get good. All PvP is sweaty. There's no room for fun. And you can have your philosophies on, but my point is, there's a lot of games today that target and strike at like the hardcore, ultra, uber competitive gamer. And, I think of Sega as still that brand that in my mind is still kind of associated with just go have fun. Like Yakuza can be a thing, but you could just go into Yakuza and dork around and just have fun for hours and hours and hours on end.
Ridiculous mini games for hours on end and not even touch the story. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so you at this point, if you've been hanging on to the show, you can tell that this is a podcast of old men because we have spent a huge chunk of time talking about legacy gaming and Sega. So I'm going to pick up the pace just a little bit. Let's bring it back into 2022. Let's talk about Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2's disc is virtually empty. This story by Sean Murray over at The Gamer. So the article starts, I quote, "The first Modern Warfare 2 had a disc that contained between 40 and 50 gigabytes of data, depending on the console you purchased the game on. The second Modern Warfare 2, which arrives tomorrow, at the time this article was written, contains just 70 megabytes. Activision didn't find some magical way to compress Modern Warfare 2's memory requirements into something that'd fit on a few floppy disks. However, those 70 megabytes just direct players to download the game, which comes in at 150 gigabytes. Before I kick it to you guys, I will just... The article's a little snarky, right? So, but let me just say, it's 150 gigabytes if you insist on downloading everything. I didn't. I downloaded Modern Warfare 2. I did not. Well, you can't opt to not download the campaign. I forget which part of it that I opted not to download, but my download was only like 62.5 gigabytes. So, so there we are. So, Kay, does this offend you? Does the notion of physical media not populated by bits, and bits are heavy, does it really like rankle you to the core and offend you morally?
I mean, offend me is a strong statement. It does not offend me in the least, but I will say, and this brings up a very great conversation that I've actually been having on Twitter with other folks, and this kind of dovetails right into that. On my show and as a person who's been out in front in the gaming community, I've always kind of, I've always believed that a man who knows nothing knows he knows something. A man who knows something knows he knows nothing at all. So the more you learn, the better you get at it, right? And one of the big things that's always bothered me is we've allowed physical media to become non-existent. Even though they're still in your hands, they don't exist anymore. And this speaks to that, right? There will come a time, even the campaign, they will turn off the servers. You will not be able to play that at all. It's just gone. Even though in a world where, some things are server-based, makes sense, right? You should be able to play a campaign that says, hey, you're offline now. You don't have access to your online bits, of course. But here's the, non-connected offline on your console game you play. As old men, as seasoned gamers, as we have already established, we can look back to these old times. I can pull up a lot of the old games we're talking about on various emulation platforms and still be able to introduce them to my children, and rekindle that emotion and the feeling I had when I first played these things. it's worrying me that because of the way we're working now with DRM and licenses and all of that, we're okay with the way things are today. And 15, 20 years from now, when Destiny 2 just doesn't exist and you can't pull it up at all, that'll be kind of a minus. We won't be able to go back there. I mean, there are folks in this space, myself included, that will work hard as we can to have other solutions in place to do so, and people do that, right? They still do that. There are games that were server backed that now are community backed and still continue, but that's not going to be for every game, and it shouldn't be for every game, right? If the game does not need an online component, we as a community should advocate that, hey, even like, and this goes broader to the consoles and stuff. At some point, you will turn your console on. It won't be able to connect to a server. It'll be a potato. It'll just be there, even though it could function, right? Let's pressure them to maybe at the last minute when it's out of life cycle, disable the capabilities of requiring authentication to servers. Who knows? These are options that can happen. And this is just one of the ways that it manifests itself. But I think that broader conversation is far more important.
Hey, let me just say, that's incredibly well said. I am somebody who I'm a technologist. I'm a modernist. I have had zero problems with leaving the legacy behind in order to skate towards the future. You know, I always look at the legacy as baggage, right?
As am I. Yeah, absolutely.
And typically, so I'm normally firmly on the opposite side of this argument. And the difference is, and this is why we do this panel. The difference is when you hear this argument, you know, on Twitter and other places, it's always associated with fire and brimstone. It's always an effort to rankle the rabble. It's always an effort to get people out with their torches and pitchforks and to kind of, you know, put the Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, Geraldo Rivera spin on it, right? And
put on the tie and start some stuff, you know.
Yeah, and spin everybody up, right, to maximum RPM, right? All pumps on fast. And like, I don't get it. And I get being passionate and being angry, but the political tactic, I will call it, right, of actually like attempting to appeal to personas like that, right, in an effort to, well, first of all, drive views and clicks. You know, it just always kind of takes me as, you know, you can always smell, you always put that through the smell test, and you can always smell the stinky poo associated with, right, just the
disingenuous arguments.
Exactly. You know, the weekly outrage, right, which is a thing that I posted. I posted like the weekly outrages of 2022. And again, that's not to say, when I say that, then I get the other side, which is, well, you're telling people not to complain, blah, blah. No, like, I want people to complain. The difference is that what Kay just said was an incredibly constructive argument for someone to actually take and extract from that actionable, right, tasks, right, things to go do. I always talk about, like, when we slog these, I'm sorry, I'm on a little bit of a rant now. When we slog these games through the mud,
preach, brother, preach,
right, and we throw things at them like, this is garbage, this is trash. I'm like, look, I work in software development. I'm going to tell you right now, a customer comes at me and gives me something I can't do anything about, I'm going to take that customer's feedback and throw it in the circular file because I can't do anything about it, right? But look, check to make sure my wife gives me something, right, that she's unhappy about. Like, if you give me feedback that I can't do anything about, all I know is you're unhappy. That's subjective, ambiguous. If I take a guess at it, it is highly likely to not result in correction.
Usually wrong.
So why am I going to put the effort into it? Right? Why am I going to, now we're talking about business, right? Why am I going to take X number of developers, have them expend who knows how many number of engineering labor hours at a cost of 200, 300, whatever my overhead fringe and all that compiles to in terms of expending that effort, right? Why am I going to do that to take a shot in the dark and it not fix anything? Right. So I just want to say I super appreciate your comment. Sorry. So Fuzzy, what are your thoughts on the topic?
Well, for me, it's not a surprise to me at all. Like it's one of those things where I'm not necessarily on the same level as far as tech is concerned with you guys, but I just kind
Oh,
of
don't
look
sell
at
yourself
some of
short,
the
Fuzzy. I've heard you speak. You know what you're talking about, sir. Don't even front.
well, I kind of saw the writing on the wall when they offered digital versions of these consoles. That's kind of telling you, hey, get ready. Physical is going away, kind of thing. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, they're going to continue with physical. Yeah, they'll continue, and they'll be just like this. Kind of like when, years ago, I always used to buy TurboTax and buy it in disc form. And it's like, after a while, PCs stopped coming with, CD-ROMs or DVD-ROMs. And it would just be basically you're buying a box with a code to go online to download the same thing. So I'm not upset at this, although it does it does suck as far as for the longevity of these things. Like as someone that I gotta double check some of my stuff that I've packed away from years ago as far as some of the older consoles and things, but I don't necessarily access those or bother with those as often, but just knowing that I have some physical media that I can go back to at some given point, gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling, especially considering now this digital age where you don't necessarily own your digital copies of stuff or digital media to the point where you could pass it along to your kids or pass it along to a loved one or something where, you'd be in violation of the terms of service kind of deal.
I mean,
because,
Fuzzy,
it's a new.
You recall a recent story where one or two or more of these holders of your digital rights one day hits a button accidentally and oops, there goes all the content you paid for. It was an accident, or even I think Sony actually deleted your movies because it was time and you couldn't do anything about it, and that's it. These are the places that we have to be when we're talking about digital rights, right? So these physical discs at this point are just fake. They don't really do anything for you. We're past that point, which is so unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I wish there was a way to that. And I know that there's companies out there that are able to archive or back up, your digital data and things along those lines. But as far as from a physical media standpoint, I'm as fine as I'm going to be, only because there isn't much that I can do outside of making burning copies of stuff or cracking whatever code on the disk type of deal or something to that effect. But I'm kind of fine with them moving forward as long as they're going to be honest about stuff and or be upfront about it. Like the fact that you have a lot of people that are like, okay, I want the physical, so that way I will always be able to play the game, but the game isn't even on there. It's. I wish there was a way to I wouldn't say force the companies to do that, but at least make the option. Like if we're going to go into the digital direction, do make physical copies available, but kind of like those limited run things where it's at a premium price. I mean, and it's not that I'm encouraging these companies to charge this premium price for this stuff, but for those that, there's going to be games that I absolutely want to have a physical copy of and make my own personal backups of and want to be able to access this, maybe 10 years or 20 years down the road for nostalgia. There should be an answer to that without it being something like infringement, like where Nintendo wants you to, delete all of your copies or things like that, even though you may have bought the game and then you're running an emulator or something type of deal. But I would like for us to moving forward, these companies just be upfront. The physical is going away. The digital consoles coming out this generation. I mean, physical copies for PCs. I had this argument on Twitter a while ago. I was like, I think the last physical copy that was mass produced was 2016, and I think that was for like Doom. But it wasn't like a mass produced like it was 5 years ago type of deal. So it's one of those things where we just have to kind of move along and accept that this is the future. But once again,
Hey, now, Fuzzy. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please finish.
No, I was going to say at least just I would say encourage the developers or the publishers to at least offer the option, even if it's limited run stuff or these limited run companies support them as long as those physical copies are a full on physical copy with all of the contents on some sort of disc or platform.
I'll just add to your point and say I agree wholeheartedly with both of you that it's not that serious and we can move forward. Like you, I'm a technologist. I'm NLB, newest, latest, best. That's where I am with it, right? But it saddens me. And as a technologist, you tend to know where the line is, right? Destiny 2 won't exist anymore. It makes sense. There's nothing you can do about that, right? But the fact that a campaign that is separate from the multiplayer is also at risk of not existing just because they chose that's where it rubs me a little wrong, right? Because that means that there's a future world we will see where you'll always be able to play, say, Mario Brothers 3 or the OG Sonics, but the Super Game Sonic will one day stop existing, and you'll still be able to play that OG Sonic. Like, if nothing else, while we're bearing a full force into the future here, there should be a and I hate saying that because every time I do, it rears up the myself and Everborn start going back and forth. There should be somebody that is responsible for keeping all of these entities honest and keeping the consumer's benefit at heart. Meaning, you didn't rent the game, you bought the game. So there has to be some way that game is yours in perpetuity forever because you purchased that thing, right? And the idea that you're secretly renting it, but you're not really saying it at $70 now. That's a very bad place we are at the beginning of this digital age, and I can only see it getting worse when everything becomes digital. Nothing becomes permanent anymore. Everything's finite, and that shouldn't be that way for things when we know specifically that they could, like a console. Hey, at the end of the PS3 gen, you could easily send out a firmware update that says turn this thing on without requiring online authentication. They've been able to do that since the 360 days. They still haven't done it because we don't complain about it.
Yeah, and there's an edge of that argument that I have definitely disagreed with in the past.
Okay.
I would say at pretty extreme points in academia. I am, and this isn't me personally, right? I mean, I think it would be great for people to own software. I have always professed that if you really dig into the EULAs and if you dig into a lot of the purchasing agreements, 99% you don't own software.
That's right, and that's the problem. You should not. That should not be a problem. That should not be the case, right? It should now, obviously, on a case by case basis, right? There's online servers that you access. There's online in perpetuity software that just cannot be owned by an individual. So in that instance, you're basically purchasing the rights to use it for a time. But there are certain instances where you can own this thing. They're just going, screw it. They don't know it anyway. Come on.
Yeah, I always advocate to people, particularly when they go on these like big rants on Twitter. I'm like, I always advocate to people, like, before you put yourself out there, you should really read. And for instance is like if you pull a Rockstar game, right, and that's the one I will point to because I've actually read through it. But I will also say, if you read games from any other publisher, you will find the same thing. A Rockstar game in the warranty, actually, they don't guarantee you that the game will work. Right? I mean, that's the thing. Your rights as a consumer is to buy the game and return it, right, within the period. That's your only right.
Yes.
So,
and actually on console, your right is to buy the game, think about it, return it before it hits your hard drive. Because if it does, you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you mentioned, it should be someone's job, I agree with the sentiment. The dollop that I throw out on top of that is, so since nobody takes on responsibilities out of the goodness of their heart in general in consumer industries, it would seem that somebody would be able to construct a viable business model where they said, look, I'm going to be the archivist for all gaming executables. And, when you buy a game, I'm going to go pay for the license, right? And I'm going to maintain the last existing version of that executable. And at any point, you're going to have to subscribe to my service now. But at any point, when you want to download that game, you maintain your subscription, or maybe even I do it on a per transaction fee, and you can come get an executable. And this is to cover down on the person who, look, as a PC gamer, what I will say is, look, if I want to build a retro box that runs on Windows 98, right, and be able to go back and get a game that I paid for, then it would be great if somewhere in the world, right, 'cause storage is cheap, I could go get that thing. And if somebody...
And that exists right now. It's just, and it's legal, it's just weird and legally ambiguous, but it exists, and it's the Internet Archive. But that shouldn't be where it all exists. There should be an actual place where I hear you. You know what I mean? And to your point of who should be that person, it should be someone like you, who knows where the lines are, right? Who knows? Hey, Destiny's 2, like a game like Destiny 2, is beyond the pale, and y'all are asking too much. But this other game that just has DRM requirements for the sake of business, yeah, when the business goes beyond that and it's archived at this point, we should be able to advocate that a firmware update or some kind of software update be put out that then negates that requirement. Those are the things that would work great in PR for people. That's the game that Xbox is trying to play right now. Hey, we're for the consumer. This kind of stuff would work across the board for everyone who agrees to it. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. I often take the side of, because I feel like somebody has to, and I feel like this is the, of the two roles, right, of what should be technologically feasible, and therefore somebody should fill that void in terms of the consumer demand that's not being met, versus this is the reality of the industry. You can acknowledge that you're on a motorcycle and that guy's on a truck, or you can scream profanity and shake your fist at the truck, but the truck's not going to move for you on the motorcycle, right? I feel like that right-handed voice is the one that I have to emphasize, because people choose not to acknowledge reality, right?
Of course. Yeah. The business realities are real, and they should also be adhered to. Absolutely, yes.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like it would be great and nice that, look, who am I to say, PlayStation 3 was 20 years ago. I don't care if you have one that's still in working condition. I'm not going to create a pathway for you to obtain your game. Like at the end of the day, one of the other things I agree with you, because I used to do this, right? If you go back to, there used to be a site called Game Copy World, which used to exist expressly because people got pissed off about buying
keep their disc on in the tray. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah,
I still use that from time to time.
Yeah, and it was legal from the aspect of, if the purposes of your use of that, what we used to call cracks, was to make a backup copy of the executable, that was legal, right? And I used to do the same thing with my movies, right? Every time I bought a movie on DVD, I used to strip the DRM from it so I could make a backup copy to utilize for myself and watch it digitally without having to stick a disc in anything. Illegal to distribute that, but right, that type of thing, that ability to just make a backup of an executable and play a game that you paid for should absolutely be out there. Next news story, over on Kotaku, by Ethan, I'm going to say Gotch. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, so I apologize if I'm butchering it. Ex-Bayonetta actress asked fans to donate boycott money to anti-abortion group. The former voice of Bayonetta has gone from calling out bad pay for gaming industry talent to plugging the controversial anti-abortion group Billboards for Life. This all started out with her boycott of Bayonetta 3. After misleading fans about her removal from the project, she's now urging them to take the money they would have spent on the Switch game's release and give it to charitable causes instead, including the Kentucky-based nonprofit whose sole mission is to blanket cities and towns with giant signs aimed at guilting and shaming would-be parents. Now, I'm going to go ahead and leap first into expressing my opinion on it to make sure it's a safe space for everyone. I would contend that there is a stink around Billboards for Life, not solely because of their political stance, but also just because some of their advertisements are tacky. And so in the context of like a Madison Avenue kind of company, I know newer generations may not be familiar with that term. That's what we used to kind of refer to as marketing outlets. Madison Avenue used to be the place. Anyway, so in the day of a professional organization of marketers and advertisers, you might want better ad copy for your money than the type of stuff that Billboards for Life puts up.
Catch more bees with honey. Yes.
Right, yeah, which it's kind of like a little cringe maybe. Just again, from a quality aspect, not commenting on your political affiliation or stance. I will also say, before I pitch it over to you guys, I think a big part of the problem with this dialogue from Helena Taylor has been, I think it's commonly accepted in the entertainment industry that this is the kind of dirty laundry that you don't air out in a public space, that, the industry as a community kind of keeps that strife and tension behind closed doors. we often hear about it from a Hollywood perspective, like 10 years like after the fact, right? Or as buzz, so and so, tried out for so and so part and lost it to whatever because they really wanted like a younger actress or whatever.
Cavill left and gave it to somebody else, and now The Witcher's in dire straits. Oh Lord, yeah, that's the latest and greatest. Yes, but indeed, yes, I stand with Superman. Let's go. I do too.
That's right.
Yes, continue.
Look, there hasn't been a Superman worthy of the title since Christopher Reeve, and it's good to have somebody back in that seat. But,
I agree, sir. I agree.
but the problem with a lot of this, I think, out in the world is that this is a person who, as a professional, threw shade at another professional, called for a. Not only have I been wronged, but because I've been wrong, making it very much about her and not about the industry or the game or gamers or consumers. Again, let me set the trash can on fire, wave my hands, look at me, and boycott the game, which is just, to me, is kind of a very extremist kind of view. So, with that all being said, Fuzzy, what are your thoughts and feelings on the topic?
It's almost like that train wreck that you can't look away from kind of thing. I think, and it's not to speak on the the topic as far as the donations and so forth, but like you said, whenever you can't handle things behind closed doors as far as whatever negotiations and such, and then you bring it into the public space and you throw out all the dirty laundry, things tend to come back to bite you to some extent. Like, she had a little bit of momentum in the beginning, and then when things got a little bit more light on it as far as the back and forth negotiations or at least what was offered versus what she wanted or whatever the case may be, it started to show that it may not have been quite the picture that she had, brought to everybody's attention. There's always multiple sides to a story. It's their side, her side, and the reality in between the two type of thing. But I don't know. I without getting political, without getting into religious beliefs and things along those lines, I'm not a particular fan of that thought process to put for donations, but I'm not going to hold that against anybody that is along those lines. But I think her best bet would have been to just kind of fade into the darkness. Once the feedback or the pushback started coming as far as, well, you said 4,000, now we're finding it's 10,000 or 15,000. It's like, how are you wronged or what? I guess she didn't think this all the way through. I guess she just figured gamers were just going to blindly follow her down this path type of deal. But I think before she even talks about donations and whatnot, I think once she got the pushback as far as where she wasn't telling complete truths or whole truths, she just not necessarily turned off her Twitter account, but at least just whatever's out there, leave that be. Don't add more fuel to the fire and just step away, because you just, now you'll have people looking into your past. Now you may even have it where you get blackballed from working in this industry, not just because you aired dirty laundry, but because you may not see eye to eye with the producers of next said game type of thing. So there's so many repercussions that she kind of brought upon herself in this, and she would have probably just been better off and be like, hey, I didn't, sorry fans, I'm not going to be, paying this go around, and, I won't be purchasing the game or playing the game, but hey, that's up to you to do type of thing and move on, or maybe just not even post on social media. Just go about your life and find other roles. That would have probably been her better bet, I think, from start.
Yeah, scream profanity and shake that fist at the truck. So Kay, your thoughts on that? And I have got to step away for about 120 seconds. So if I can ask you to riff on your opinion on this topic until I get back, because I definitely want to. And I'll still be able to hear you. By the way, I definitely want to hear your guys' opinion on Xbox Game Pass. But before then, your opinions on the Bayonetta controversy.
Sure. So my opinion, basically, and Fuzzy, you laid it out pretty well. My problem with all of this is she was a bad messenger to an important message, right? I've always been of the idea that when you look at the potentials of how much these games make when it's all said and done, right? The idea that the QA folks, basically, who are responsible for whether this game is completely broken at launch or runs as smooth as butter, these guys get the lowest pay. You know, the artists who potentially give voice and give facial work to the characters, they usually are the lower end on the totem pole. Obviously, there's a lot of hands in the pot when you make a game. That's one of those unique disciplines where a lot of different specialties come together to form that one union, right? So you can't be out here going, "Hey, I demand this, I demand that," when there are so many others in there. But the point of, hey, we are underpaid, we are underserved, we're being underpaid, and even in specifically the QA departments and whatnot as well, that is a very important conversation to be had, right? And specifically with Ms. Taylor coming out and having the conversation she was, you know, if you're going, as Ham rightly pointed out, if you're going to come out and air dirty laundry that has historically been known to be in the background and no one speaks about it, then you better make sure that how you address the situation and what the content of your message is very well thought through, because then you're basically asking for every eyeball to be on you. And of course, as the eyeballs started coming on her, then it was like, oh, well, it wasn't 4,000 total, it was 4,000 per session. At the end of the day, $15K for your work in Bayonetta 3, an IP that will by and large, looking at the Metacritic, will gross millions of, will sell millions of copies and possibly millions of dollars. 15,000 for your portrayal of the character on the third iteration. You want to have a conversation about that not being right? I want to have that conversation as well. I think you have a point to make, but to have that conversation, you must come out and be as forthcoming and as straightforward as possible. Omissions of truth and all of this basically muddies the message and sets your cause and everyone's cause back by many, 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 many years. You know, and of course, as Fuzzy says it, right after that, when you stepped in it and you realize that you're the bad messenger, instead of turning tail, slinking and walking away and hoping that your message doesn't get lost forever, you double down, you insult your competitors or your colleagues in the space, and then you start, you know, proliferating your own agenda, whatever that agenda may be, right? Whatever that agenda may be. But at the end of the day, you've already gotten a stink on you, man, or woman. You know, maybe now's not the time to then, you know, keep going in that direction. So honestly, this whole situation, I hope that people can forget the messenger and still stick with the message, because some of these folks really deserve to be paid more, in my humble opinion. Some of these folks literally make or break these characters. You don't believe me? Play all the Uncharted games and then go watch Uncharted the movie. Yeah. Some of these folks deserve to be respected in the space far more than they are currently, and that's a conversation that needs to be had. It doesn't mean they need to be showered with the millions and billions that they may want, but just the idea that, hey, these guys might want to renegotiate certain contracts, may want to have a bigger seat at the table. That is a conversation that I think, in the world where budgets are ballooning and they're doing Naughty Dog level high caliber fare, this is a conversation that should be had. And unfortunately, her contribution to it may have set that back, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I because I didn't get all spooled up about this issue, I didn't do my normal kind of investigative digging, but it just occurred to me as you were going through that, I was like, you know, voice actors have a union.
Yes.
You know, and so if this were an issue, maybe the lesson learned from that is to...
And unfortunately, it's when you start digging into those details, some are unionized, some are not. Some of them require it to be union before you'll get the job. Some require not to be union. You know, there needs to be a more mature, more broad conversation about how all of this stuff plays out and how they are at the low rung of the totem pole, when by and large, if you're the consumer, you see and or hear them more than you see and or hear much of everything else. Of course, there are unsung heroes throughout the entire process. I feel like her, some of these other unsung heroes, and I keep harping on the QA department, you know, they need to be brought in, and that conversation needs to be had. And unfortunately, folks like this, Helena Taylor, speaking the way they do, takes away from that conversation. And unfortunately, you know, then we have to continue dealing with status quo until the yoke of her ridiculousness has passed the zeitgeist. You know what I mean? Like, it's unfortunate.
And that's the key thing. Like, this would have been the opportunity to capitalize on a conversational thread, on a discussion that would have brought things like that to light. The topic of unionization, how it's handled, how these deals are put together. But it didn't go the direction of being about.
We should be blaming Platinum Games, and unfortunately, we're standing behind Platinum Games now, and that's a problem. We should be blaming Platinum Games right now.
Yep, totally agree. Last news story over on GameSpot by Grace Benfell. Xbox Game Pass is not growing as fast as Microsoft anticipated. And before I get into this, let me just comment. I love the news outlets, and I'm not saying GameSpot is like somebody, a news outlet to be put on a platform, on a pedestal, right? However, this particular news story came out a little bit after a lot of the commentary ran around about Spencer saying Game Pass is profitable. And I always approve of the news outlets like GameIndustry.biz who don't race, right, to be first to post, but actually wait for a little more information to come out and put together more thought pieces, right, than just kind of slapping a headline on the front page of the tabloid to tell you that aliens were dissected out in Roswell. So this article, and I quote, Game Pass subscription targets fell short of Microsoft company goals, according to a new financial filing from the tech giant. According to a report from Axios, we should also mention, right, as I read that Game Pass subscription targets fell short of company goals is extracted from a financial filing, an official document. A lot of the speculation running around about Game Pass profitability has not been based on an official filing, but has been based on sometimes quotes, and those I approve of, but also very many times before Spencer made this comment is around people's interpretation of sound bites, right, from different executives who sometimes maybe don't kind of fully understand how this stuff works, and what the legal ramifications are of a C-level officer saying things that aren't true, right? So at any rate, Game Pass subscription, also around slides extracted from a CADE documentation that was not actually part of the actual CADE documentation file, but were actually people's riffs on graphic visualization of data that they had supposedly pulled from different sources, not all of which are corroborated. But anyway, Game Pass subscription targets fell short of Microsoft company. According to a new financial filing from the tech giant, according to a report from Axios, Microsoft targeted a 73% gross rate for Game Pass for last fiscal year, which ended June 30th, 2022. The service grew instead by 28%. I'm going to pass to you guys, but if in the course it comes up in your dialogue to talk about the difference between targeted versus performance incentive pay for C-level officers, I think that's a thing to be. While I praise this article, I feel like there's a few points that got things wrong.
How about you level that playing field first and foremost? How about you explain that? Lay that one out first. Yes.
Yeah. So I would say, from my personal viewpoint, a 73% gross increase for a subscription service is a ridiculously high bar to jump, in my opinion, in one single fiscal year.
Ridiculously high bar.
So this is where we need to talk about what and this article uses the term targeted, and that's not the term that I think is appropriate or applicable and wouldn't have used it. Satya Nadella's, okay, so we
10% of,
yeah,
by the way.
So we run around, and a lot of people talk about these things as bonuses. For anybody who's actually been on one of these programs, they're never referred to as bonuses. There are HR reasons, there are compensation reasons why they are not referred to as such. There are SEC filing reasons. There are performance incentive plan, right? Not to be confused with the negative version of a performance incentive plan, often called a PIP. These bonus structures are never referred to as a PIP because a PIP has a negative connotation. However, they are typically performance incentive pay, and this is where company goals, financial goals that are associated with your position and the company are typically laid out. And they're typically laid out with weights and percentages given to certain things so that they comprise like the makeup of your bonus. Lots of times they're associated with just how well the business does, sometimes whether you had anything to do with it or not. And in a chunk of these, typically, I will say normally when I've seen them, and I've been on a few of these, typically they're normally like 3 to 5 goals, right, that make up these plans. Different ones have different weights. They typically, the way we construct them, some of them will be gimmies, right? They're just things that are going to happen, and they're things that aren't directly associated with you, right? They're revenue goals or whatever. Then some might be directly attributable to you. Like if you're in charge of a particular function in a business or a particular market segment, right, and productization of that, it might say grow that part of the business by X percentage, right? That's on you. Yep. You're the person writing the proposals. You're the person going out and getting that business. You're the person making the deals. It's directly associated with you. So my point is that my performance incentive plan might not be the company's goals or objectives. The company's goals or objectives might be 28%. That's the target. The target doesn't have to do with me. It has to do with the shareholders and the investors. It has to do with the company. But if my performance incentive plan is something above that, that's first of all to drive me to make sure I hit the minimum, right? And that's to reward me if I exceed the minimum. So the conflation of the term, Nadella's bonus marker was the same as the corporate objectives. That's not necessarily true.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. And I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Now, real quick, let me take you on a quick conspiracy theory here. And you know where this is coming from because you and I have a mutual friend who literally trades in conspiracy theories as a matter of course. That is what he does. And him being my co-host, the slander kind of rubs off on you from time to time. It is very interesting that they're in such a hot contested back and forth with this ABK situation, right? And every time there is a new matter of worry by the CMA and or the UK or the regulatory bodies at large, either news or statements come out that downplay that exact thing that they're worried about. Now, the last time it was, oh, COD is a beast. Then Phil comes out, oh, COD's everywhere. We're even taking it to Switch. CMA, you said that didn't matter, right? Switch doesn't have it. We're bringing it there. Then the idea was, oh, cloud, you guys have an unfair advantage. Guess what? It's not even growing that much, right? Look at our numbers. It's not even going to be more than, 10-15% of our global growth, as he said. They're literally like dashing every single argument they can here and there. So while the numbers are real and it's from an official filing, and I completely buy into all that, the percentage of growth that they projected was just so unrealistic. It tells me that they knew they were basically creating a self-fulfilling prophecy so they'd have it when they needed it. And now they have it because they need it. So it seems. I could be wrong, but it's really interesting how you guys are being told that, oh, you guys are the biggest cloud market in the environment, and we should be worried about you. Then you go, well, and if anybody remembers the movie Blazing Saddles, to tell a family secret, we don't actually use Azure servers. We're using consoles in the cloud. You know what I'm saying?
That was argument that comes out. Yeah, that little play on word orchestration really rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah, because.
You know what I'm saying? It's so interesting that keeps happening, right? And let me be absolutely clear here. I want this thing to go through. I suspect it will. I'm still on the train that it will most likely go through with zero concessions because Microsoft sees other things that are more important, and those other things that are more important, the CMA, and they've been strategic and successful in keeping the eyes focused solely on the crumbs on the table that is Call of Duty. Y'all can keep focusing there, and we'll just let King sit in the background, just chilling, counting their money. So, I want this thing to go through. I think it will go through. But all this back and forth, all this is very funny to me because it just seems to be playing out like this sometimes $3 trillion company going, dance monkeys, we're here for you. You know what I mean? So it seems to me.
And one of the things I want to point out, you bring up a good point, and it makes me want to capitalize on like saying this about like this show and the rotating cast, right? One of the things I want to bring out in this show is that it should be okay, right? In the gamer Twitter conversation, the gaming social media conversation, where everything tends to be about absolutes, every person is in a camp of a given platform. People don't talk about things in kind of objectively, like. It should be okay, right, to want the deal to go through, right, and concurrently admit that this deal potentially holds threat of its impact on competitiveness, right? Those things in my mind can both be true. It's just a matter of how they wind up then, right, getting dealt with. So, I struggle a little bit with some of the contention out there that says, you have to double down on one extreme or the other. From a historical aspect, from somebody who's been a student of the industry for going on 40 years now, right? I love watching things happen. Look, I was a Cold War kid. I grew up, I don't know, thinking the Soviets were the enemy. However, I love seeing the wall come down and the way the world changed, right? Because as a history student, as a political science student, I love seeing the change. If I got to watch the greatest symphony in the world can exist, that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to see the exact arrangement of that symphony every single time.
Day out.
Right?
Yeah.
I need to see the change, right? I need to see somebody else's riff on it. I need to see somebody else's take on that arrangement of that musical piece. That's what's interesting. This move for me creates a shift in the industry, a shift in the trajectory, a change in the history, and a pivot in the way things are going to be from here on out. And I love to see that. However, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say Microsoft's position in cloud, the fact that it owns Azure, the way it can peanut butter costs around, right? The way they can leverage market adjacencies, right? Creates an environment, and the past historical fact of their own behavior, right? I wouldn't be saying this if the fact that in 2019, they hadn't increased the cost of Office 365 to every business in Europe that wasn't running Office 365 on Azure. Right? Like, look, I didn't make that happen. I didn't make that up, but it happened. Right?
It's a fact. That's right. Yeah.
So it'll be cool to see it unfold. It's interesting. What I'm hoping to see is more regulatory agencies dig into these things and bring up topics. And to me, the other big part of this is it also should be acceptable that one country's regulatory agency who doesn't have a big tech capability, right, in their gross national industrial base has one point of view because they have to import all of their high tech capability from the US versus
Brazil.
Versus another country who has that mind share and could compete, but they have a commerce framework that doesn't allow the growth of mega corporations in the same way that the U.S. does, and all those mega corporations coming over into those countries, right, are able to leverage and throw their weight around in a way that their own homegrown, right, national industries can't. It should be natural to think that those two regulatory agencies would have a different perspective on the matter. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So I'm sorry, I've got it. Fuzzy, what are your thoughts on the? Kay, were you done? With,
no. Okay. Please, Fuzzy, speak. Yes.
No, my biggest thing is, as someone that used to do the marketing aspect for a website in the aftermarket automotive industry, like that 70% target, just we all know that is. I mean, even in during the pandemic, I don't think anybody
doesn't that scream for you, Fuzzy. We know this is going to fail, and let's let it fail right when we need it to fail. Like, come on.
I mean, because like even in the automotive industry, and we went from being a small mom and pop shop to one of the major players, and the only major player that was bigger than us had all of the OEM contracts. We were talking in increments of 15 to 18%. Like if we can get that kind of growth, and some years that's tough. I mean, there were years where we had 60% growth, and on internet and web sales and whatnot. But 70%, it just seems like somebody cherry picked that number to set it. I wouldn't necessarily set it up for failure, but as far as to kind of keep things. I guess in perspective is about the bigger way to look at it. Because
Fuzzy, can I like the growth that they did achieve, 20%, 8%, that is remarkable. That is startup. Growth. That is startup Silicon Valley level growth.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, that is good growth. And the growth they have on PC Game Pass, that is revolutionary growth. But then again, it could be they had 2 people before and now they have 5. But you know what I'm saying? Like the percentage is always funny there. But absolutely, Fuzzy. Like that is what made me go into the conspiracy theory direction. The number percentage that they targeted. Come on, you guys they are known as the company that, to a fault, uses numbers a little too much. Y'all are smarter than that. That tells me you did it on purpose.
It's like they had the forecast is based off of the 3 billion number as opposed to the actual, more realistic 200 million number that are,
right.
Engaging console fan base type of thing that's out there now. So it's like, yeah, they are definitely playing the slide rule or something for this, just to kind of, I guess, it's funny that it's like the timing of it, like you said, it's more than a coincidence, let's just say. But it just seemed like that was a goal that I can't imagine anybody obtaining. Like I've had an unrealistic goal put on me to get one of our divisions up, and it was already doomed to fail. And I said, just give it to me and see what I can do with it, as a, limited budget, small team. And yeah, they were like, okay, we want to see, in the 30s. And, I came close enough, but not close enough to, get, I guess, the corner office kind of thing. But it was like, oh yeah, we want to see 30+% growth. And I got to 22, which I did some tricks and things like that as far as our marketing on the $0 budget. But yeah, we're talking about a $2 trillion company setting lofty goals like that for its CEOs, financials type of thing. Yeah, that was something that they, I guess, kind of set up so that way they'll have like, oh look, see, we're not as big and overbearing as the kids like to say, or whatever the case may be. But it just seemed like it was a bit off. But
so
they're doing well enough.
Can I add a question to that? Like there was a question, and Brap saying this in the chat, he brought up a similar comment, and I kind of want to dovetail on that because Phil Spencer came out and said literally basically like the growth in Game Pass is slowing down, right? And they expected as much, and now Brap, I see him asking, hey, do we think we expect more growth in Asia and other developing markets? My question is, do we take Phil Spencer's word that, oh, we see it's stalling? Because again, to me, that sounds a lot more like answering, like quelling concerns rather than a true statement, right? Because let's be real here, the reason why no one's signing up to Game Pass is because all it has are third parties, great third parties. Don't get me wrong, great third parties and awesome indies and all of that, but in the world where you have the stuff that's on billboards showing up in day one Game Pass, I suspect you'd see more growth, and they know that. Right? They know that. So the idea that, oh, well, we've plateaued, we've hit our where we think we should be, and it'll probably just stay here all this time. So now, of course, as Brap is saying, Asian markets, other markets that, of course, have better infrastructure as far as internet speeds and whatnot, they might focus more there. I get all that, and that's all a very normal argument to make, but I kind of feel like, again, it's one of those, we're here to speak directly to the CMA and other regulatory bodies who may have be eyeballing these numbers, so let's downplay the numbers rather than it actually being a factual thing. Oh yeah, we've hit where we think we're going to hit. If y'all had like Redfall and all these other things that you say are coming, I doubt that those numbers would reflect the same way. Do you guys disagree with me? What do you think?
No, I agree with you on that.
Well, I'll say I disagree just in as much as some of the nuances of the interpretation, right? So first of all, where I will start is Phil Spencer is a C-level officer, right? There are things C-level officers, right?
Yes,
things C-level officers can't say that directors and below can, right?
Yeah,
I'm a director. I can say things. My boss can't, right? Who's the CEO? Yeah. So,
but he can kind of interpret things in a way that it's not necessarily a lie, but it's maybe self-serving in a different way. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. This is a matter of influence, and for people who have been associated in the business of influencing regulatory agencies or influencing anyone, customers, right? Understands, right, the war on words, right, that's going on here. What I will say is, to me, it is absolutely a matter of interpretation. And Brap mentioned something about Asian markets. So, first thing I wanted to point out is I haven't seen the filing. The topic of growth of what? Because growth can be revenue, it can be dollars, or it could be subscriber numbers. The way a lot of the industry, right, when you look at these subscription services, right, when we look at the ISPs, when we look at telecoms, when we look at the cell phone carriers, all of these people tend to report growth in terms of subscriber numbers.
Yep.
But I haven't seen the filing, so there's nothing that says that is what the growth target was. So that's number one. Number two, when Spencer says these things, I would say that he's absolutely within legal bounds for them to be within parameters of time, and so he could absolutely be saying we expect that growth is somewhat stalled for the period of time until there is some strategic shift, such as when production pipeline kind of corrects itself, and we're now at the point where we're pumping out a greater number of AAA first party titles. One would think that event horizon is kind of late next spring of 2023, right? So I think he could say it has stalled for now, and then in May of 2023, right, we'll see it taking off again.
It's almost like a strategic stall, if you will. Yeah.
Right. And then another thing that I mentioned out is, there's such wiggle room for them to play because of the fact that there are so many things in Game Pass, right? There's Xbox Live, right? There is Game Pass. There's Game Pass at multiple tiers. There's Game Pass on console and PC. And here's the big one. There's also Xbox Cloud Gaming, right? Which you only get access to at the higher tier. So when Brap talks about where do we expect to see growth, here's my personal view. In the Western world, right, in these countries where the barrier to access a piece of $500 hardware isn't as great, the typical Game Pass subscriber has been someone who has an Xbox, right? So we've kept the service within the fold, right, of the people who are already part of the Xbox ecosystem. However, the big get for Game Pass, the whole reason in my mind Microsoft does it, right? And we go back to, and this isn't me saying it.
Of Game Pass.
Exactly. It's as Satya has said, and Spencer has said, it's to access the 2 billion other gamers on the planet for whom obtaining a $300, $500 piece of hardware is a barrier. These are the countries that, when you go to the list of 85 countries where the Xbox is sold, right, these are the countries that pay ridiculously high prices for them, right, which further gets exacerbated by foreign exchange rates, right? And so, but as Brad mentioned, they also have higher infrastructure. So having a mobile phone and playing games isn't a big difference for them, right? It's a lot of podcasts have talked about, well, nobody wants to play this type of game on a mobile phone. I'm like, dude, you haven't been in Tech Alley, right, in Japan and China where all this stuff goes down, right? We talk about even like the Logitech G Cloud device, right? One of the things I mentioned is in the Western world, that's probably not a big play, because I already have a mobile phone. But you go
in a country where your entire city is blanketed with decent, almost 5G levels Wi-Fi, it changes the equation. Absolutely, 100%.
And on top of that, those countries are not as cannibalization and overlap averse as we are in the West. They don't necessarily go, well, I already have a phone, so why do I need that device? They're still going to go get that device because they're just accustomed to having a bag full of gadgets, right? Which is fine. So I expect growth over there to continue and to be greater. Now, here's the other thing. It can also be, true with what Spencer said, that I think from a market positioning standpoint, they do only want Game Pass to be about 10 to 15% of the Xbox gaming portfolio. What they want to have happen is they want the entire portfolio to increase over time and for that growth to go up as they start correcting again the production pipeline and start pumping out more games. And that split between subscription service versus game sales versus whatever else, right, maintains that balance of 10 to 15%, right? But that's not to say that the entire portfolio isn't going to uplift, right, and become a greater revenue generator. Yeah. And as now I add Activision, and now all of a sudden I'm not at 16 billion, I'm at 24 billion. Right. And then I increase the growth right over time because now Xbox Cloud Gaming is more attractive and I start bringing in more subscriptions. Right. That has knock-on effects of other things. And we still haven't seen everything that they plan on rolling out. Right. We're probably going to get additional hardware this generation. We're probably going to, and I mean high-end hardware.
Push that back. Yeah. Right. Did they push the cloud thing back recently, which is also another really strategic timing thing they did there. It all smacks really, I wouldn't say shady, but Come on now, I'm looking at you with the side eye. You know what I'm saying? It's all
More
the
than
timing is a little
coincidence.
too. It's a little too coincidental. Yes.
Yeah, and it's absolutely true that probably, and both sides are playing this, right? Both sides are currently incentivized to not come off as the gorilla in the room. Microsoft is incentivized
100%.
to not come off showing that they've got a ton of enterprise capability and cloud backbone to throw around and subscriptions that are propagating right all over the place willy-nilly. And Sony is also incentivized to not come out and announce a ton of like exclusive deals or big victory.
God of War is
victory
literally
lap.
coming out right now. Literally, God of War is coming out right now. I expect to see the tom drums everywhere. I don't see it is quiet whisper. I'm like, where is the marketing push? Where is the boy being propagated through every radio I can hear? Silence, right? It took even Call of Duty themselves to come out and go, guess what, PlayStation players, you get all this stuff, and they went quiet about it. Come on now, be quiet. Like it's very suspicious what's going on both sides. You're absolutely right. It's pretty hilarious to watch.
Yeah. It's a good time. It's fun to be able to sit back and watch a lot of this stuff happen and play games, right? There are lots of people sitting back watching this stuff happening, not playing games, right? Talking about like all the kind of crazy thoughts and reasons for outrage, right, as these things go on. And I'm just sitting over here with my controller in my hand doing my thing. So that's going to wrap it up for the news segment. I definitely appreciate your guys' insight. Fuzzy, to round out the show, you mentioned that you've been playing GT7 and some other things. What's kind of tier 2 in your playlist? What other things have you been playing besides your mains?
Right now, it's Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2. Campaign is about I'm about 80% through. But it's one of those where instead of just finishing off in one sitting, I'm just kind of spacing it out. And then there's I forget what the name of the game. Crap. Well, on my Steam Deck, there was I think it's Hong Kong Shootout or something like that, or Showdown is one of the games, and there's like another one that I got free on Steam that's kind of like a ball, like a rolling ball game, and I can't remember the name of it, but just a couple of games on my Steam Deck that, whenever I'm not on the console, if I'm, doing updates on the computer and not doing, Grand Theft Auto 5 with PC mods and things like that, or Insurgency Sandstorm with PC mods, I'm on my Steam Deck playing like smaller titles, like even Cult of the Lamb, which I need to go back to, and
great game.
I think it's Eyes in the Dark was another one that I like, where it's like you're going through and it's like pitch black until you can shine lights in areas to see the layout, and then you have to worry about getting through certain areas to get keys or clues to save your uncle type of deal. But that's the basic stuff that I've been playing on the second tier.
So Kay, how about you?
Oh, so this is where I admit something that I've been doing that is just, I've been playing a bunch of Sonic Lost World. And why have I been doing that?
Everborn will never let you live this down.
Oh my god! Well, no. Actually, it's because of him that I've been playing it. Because we found this game, 2017 game, Lost to Time, panned across the board by all Sonic fans, right? And he obviously at the time it came out, probably had bugs, frame rate issues, whatnot. It's been some time removed. Better hardware's out there. Much like happens with Sonic games, you now play it and it runs solid, 60 frames per second. Everything's top tier. It runs perfectly. And of course, we're playing it on the Steam Deck. So we've been going back and forth. He seems to suggest that Sonic Team, the original team that makes Sonic games, don't miss. And all the other ridiculous things have been the other teams. And I kind of don't believe that. This is a Sonic Team joint. What I will say is it is the best Mario Galaxy like I have ever seen. From a world building and designing of the levels perspective, it is top tier, like Nintendo levels of quality and imagination on display. Really good. The problem is you put Sonic in it. because now you got to fast through all that stuff because they want you to platform and they want you to be strategic and I want to do that because the level design is glorious. But the minute you do this, right, then you got to slow Sonic down, which is really weird, to the point where Mr. Everborn Saga himself played this game for 30 minutes and did not recognize that there was a button that you have to hold down for Sonic to actually go his normal speed. Otherwise, it's slow walk, chill Sonic all the time. And you're just like, what is this game, right? But the best way I could describe it, and I described this to him on the show, if they made this the Knuckles game, 10 out of 10. Climbing things, 10 out of 10. But they had to make it a Sonic game, so it's like, okay, you'll go through it, you blaze fast, right? Don't see anything as fast as you can, and then the next time you don't hold the speed button, you just do the slow walk Sonic so you can get to all the things you want to get to. Like, I'm still playing it because the world building and the actual moment to moment, the various levels that they put together, like, it's like, let's be real here. Sonic has never really been like the best of the best in 3D. I believe it hit its stride in 2D, and Sonic Mania proves that as well, right? But you can tell that when 3D Sonic made a thing, it's almost like they went and spoke to all these fans and went, of the levels we put in this, which ones are your favorite? And most people went, the tropical levels. Okay, so this whole game is nothing but tropical levels, which is great, right? And the intricacy of how they do it, it's all really, really, really inventive and interesting. It's just the character that's in it going fast, that just blowing everything away and not being able to actually interface with those interesting things. That makes me think it's a very unique thing of its time, and it informs my thoughts on how Frontiers will be. To me, it looks like they kept that same idea, but went, yeah, maybe Mario Galaxy wasn't the where to go, because it's those small little islands, and you can't really do much speeding in those small little islands. So let's go Breath of the Wild instead, where it's an open world and you can run your thing, and moment to moment and momentum building. It seems like they're following that path, and I find like it's an interesting artifact on the path to Frontier. I'm actually looking forward to Frontier. I think Frontier will be interesting one way or another. Everborn Saga seems to suggest that it'll outdo Ragnarok. I think he's smoking something, but that's neither here nor there. So there's that one. And then, of course, as I am now a Steam Deck stan, I had to play Enslaved Journey to the West. For those who don't know that is Ninja Theory trying to be Naughty Dog in like 2015. And by and large, they succeed. On Steam Deck, 60 frames, perfect frame rate, runs beautifully. The game is awesome. So if anyone's not played it before, it's usually very cheap out there, and it is a game worth playing. When you play that game, you will be excited for whatever Ninja Theory does next, and that's basically what I've been playing.
So is Enslaved? Yeah, okay. Was it Journey to the West or Odyssey to the West?
Odyssey to the West.
Okay. Yeah.
No. Isn't it? No, it's Journey to the West. It's Journey to the West. Am I wrong? Did I write that wrong?
I think it's Odyssey. And I
think it's Odyssey? It might be.
Was this the second? Was this the?
Oh yeah, 100%. Odyssey to the West. You're right.
Okay. Yep. And was this the second game, or did this game have a sequel? I can't remember.
No, this was the first and only version of this game here, and I for one, am very sad about it. They need a sequel, but I think it was published by Bandai Namco. Yeah, published by Bandai Namco. So they may not own the rights to it. And it's kind of loosely based on the mythology that basically a lot of Japanese, Chinese influenced games are influenced by. The Dragon Ball Z, the Dragon King, the Monkey King, right? The character that you play is called Monkey in the game. It is a very interesting game. It's obviously it's a product of its time. You can see that there's been a lot more maturity and a lot more modernization since then, but it's still very underrated, very beautiful game, well made. I think people should check it out, and it's super cheap, so you can play it on anything at this point.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I did not know that this game also came to PC, so it's pretty awesome. For me, my tier 2 has been a smattering of a bunch of different things. I only mentioned Grid because Fuzzy's here and he also loves racing games. So I've been really digging into the past history of the Grid series because some of the later iterations I missed. And so I've been playing the 2019 Grid on the PlayStation 5. And I've also been playing the original, the OG Race Driver Grid on Xbox, which came out in 2008. But really, and I've also been playing Modern Warfare 2. I pulled it down last night. I had
play that campaign. I gotta get into that campaign. Everybody tells me the campaign's amazing. I'm a campaign guy. I need to play that campaign.
And this is very interesting. I talked a little bit about the swerve from like my gaming past to now. This has been the first Call of Duty that I have actually not bothered with the single player campaign. I just got it and got straight to the multiplayer because, man, I got to make my progress. I got to hit prestige before season 1 starts. That's what it's all about. So
before the sweaty youngins get in there, right?
That's right. So that's but the other thing, probably the most important thing to me, is today, this morning, and it was a bit of a struggle in time management, but I did go back to Destiny 2 on the PlayStation 5, and so. As I've gone deeper and deeper down this PvP path, and I don't play Destiny 2 PvP, Destiny 2 was in my playlist rotation, but I was just like, I think I'm done. Like, I'm constantly trying to keep up with the story, and like, I don't memorize the lore, and I got to go back and blah, blah. Like, I think I'm okay. But I actually decided to go back to it, like I said, on the PlayStation 5, and I play on PC and Xbox as well. I just had an itch to like get back into it, and maybe it was a feeling of guilt and remorse that, well, maybe I shouldn't stave off all story-driven stuff. So I came back to it. A funny thing is, I think I'm finally realizing it now because I've hit it for the second time. I think Destiny 2 does this thing where if you start a character and you don't finish like a chapter or a campaign or whatever in the past, I think if you come back the next season, maybe 2 seasons, and you haven't like leveled them to that first milestone, like you're just not progressing that character. So my PlayStation account has a weird thing where I have a Titan and I have a Warlock who have completed some smattering of a bunch of campaigns. And for whatever reason, years after the fact, I was like, oh, I need a Hunter on this account. So and on Xbox, I had the same thing with a Titan, but both times, like, I would pull those characters out. I would try and play the campaign, and it's just like I wasn't like the minimum level. It didn't give me the prompt that it sometimes gives you on that login screen that tells you, hey, you can level this character up to 1350 now or whatever. Like the character's like just broken, which is a super interesting thing from a software development perspective. But
does it have something to do with the fact that they took some of those campaigns away? So because that progression is broken, they didn't anticipate folks hopping over that progressive story to possibly get to the next line. So they're just kind of stuck in limbo for now until they figure that out. That's weird.
It's absolutely possible. It's a super weird thing from just like your typical Destiny 2 experience, which is just always like you can come back to a character. Where this is twice now I've had this state where they've been at a light level below whatever the minimum was for that next chapter. And like I said, like many times is the case that what you'll see a prompt that allows them to just auto level up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're back to the new stuff. We'll start you at minimum light level of where you need to be able to actually play the new one. So they're just like not giving you that. You're just kind of stuck in. That's so strange.
Yeah, so I've actually had to delete that character and just start over, which is fine. And I think this is maybe the most poignant thing of my lesson learned out of this whole thing. I don't know, and I do look. I'm not a big, huge game completionist, right? You can call me whatever people want, fake gamer, whatever. Like, look, I play tons of games.
You're a grazer. Don't worry about it. What grazer? Fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
And I get committed to the things that I actually wrote on my blog. I think last year, I never get involved in a game that I can't walk away from in 30 seconds or less. Right? That great line from the movie Heat. And so. But I got to tell you, man, I don't know that there's any game that I've ever played that playing back through the beginning, early stages, is ever as engaging to me as Destiny 2. Like, Destiny 2 feels like, it's like your favorite movie. It's like, look, I've seen this opening sequence like dozens of times before. I don't care. Yeah. It's my thing. And I'm not saying Destiny 2 is my favorite game. I'm just saying that, like, reliving that first outage, right, as a guardian waking up and getting into that adventure, stepping onto that yellow brick road for the very first time, it's just something that's always it's a thing.
Yeah, it's very. I completely agree with you, and I actually think to a larger extent, so was Destiny 1. But then they cut it, which was just so unfortunate, right? Some of us campaign people just want to play that campaign. That's all. Don't want to go do any of the raids, none of that. I want to relive those campaign moments. You're absolutely right. There's a specialty to that beginning of it, right? And then it goes off the rails and you don't even know where the story goes. But those beginning moments were perfect. Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
I'll agree on Destiny 2. Not as much on Destiny 1, but
Okay.
for me, I would also put Division 1 into that, more so than Division 2, even though I still play a good bit of Division 2. There was something about Division 1, and I think that atmosphere as far as the snow and just going from, fighting with people in the street to fighting with the military that's supposed to protect that area, that whole storyline, even though it's not as intricate of a story, but it gets you from mission to mission. That's one that I can always go back, recreate a character, go through it, and sink another, I don't know, probably 60 hours leveling up a character to level 30 type of deal. But yeah, Destiny 2 is up there as well.
Well, gentlemen, I got to tell you, this has been absolutely one of the great conversations in gaming. I certainly appreciate it. I certainly appreciate your time being here. Kay, where can people find you and your stuff?
Oh, well, I first and foremost want to say I appreciate you having me out here. We had you on our show, and to date, I still get great comments on all the interesting things we discussed on that show. So I appreciate you being there, and hopefully I'll invite you to come back on one day soon, and we'll do that all again. But you can find me TKO Wasanti on Xbox, PlayStation, Twitter, all the places you want to find me. I am the co-host of the Gaming Circle podcast. Right now, you go on YouTube.com, you go at the Gaming Circle podcast in any search browser, and you'll be able to find the show. And I think last week we had, this week myself and Everborn Saga had a pretty great show, but last week we also had the great Jez Corden on, who came and gave us his thoughts as well. We're a small channel and we're growing exponentially. We love all the support we're getting, so we appreciate it. And Fuzzy, of course, has been on our show as well. It's just always a couple of guys having a good time on a Saturday morning, being slanderous and keeping it PG-13. So if you're interested, please join us, and we appreciate y'all for checking us out and supporting.
And Fuzzy, how about you? Where can people find you and your stuff?
Just want to thank you for the invite, and it was awesome being on here with you guys. And man, this was a great Sunday conversation. For anybody out there that wants to hear my rambling on anything gaming related, just follow me on Twitter, Fuzzy_Belvedere. You can find me on the Shop Podcast on Saturdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Well, actually, after the time change, it will go back to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on PTK Blam's channel. The Xbox lunch break special on Double Barrel Gaming on Mondays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then the FSP on Fun Speculations channel at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Mondays. Breakfast with Boom on Fridays on Double Barrel Gaming, and then later that evening, Xbox Ultimate once again on Fun Speculations channel at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks again so much for having me on. It was fun being here with you guys.
And thanks so much. For myself, we will be live again with another episode of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast over on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube at about 8:45 p.m. Eastern. So you're welcome to swing by and join us for that, or watch the VOD after the fact. It will also be available for in audio format for download, for listening on the go, over on SoundCloud, Spotify, and on Pocket Cast. So for anybody who happened to swing through the live stream, I appreciate you. Brap, we appreciate you. Everyone else who joined in today, I appreciate you as well. For anybody out there watching the archive version of this podcast on the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, I appreciate you as well. Please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever I post new content for this show. Hopefully it will be back in another 2 weeks' time, probably on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, if I can put together another great set of co-hosts like we have today, like we had for episode 1. For everyone who's been watching, for everyone who watches later, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, swing by here or lots of these other podcasts to talk about the games that you love. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for me and us. I'm out of here. Thanks again to Kay Asante and Fuzzy Belvedere. Thanks so much for coming through. We will catch up with you guys later.